Eskom has warned that rolling blackouts may be escalated further due to a shortage in generation capacity. Stage 2 was implemented at 10 o'clock this morning. It will remain in place until midnight tonight. The power utility says Stage 2 will resume at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning until midnight on Sunday. Here's Eskom's spokesperson, Sikonati Manchaja at Eskom.
Sometimes in a day, and the generators return then, to successfully back to the grid. However, we have experienced some breakdowns that have resulted in the loss of generation capacity for many days. Now, the GCE, Andre has just spoken about Kusile. So at Kusile, we had to shut down two of, the units. And these are big units, in excess of 700 megawatts. And unfortunately, it took longer to return them. As Andre said, Unit 2 returned successfully this morning. However, Unit number 4, that was expected to return to service tomorrow, is now only expected to return on Monday. Now, although we have 4 units at Tutuka, the power station unfortunately continued to struggle to provide reliability supply to the grid. The 4 units out of 6 running now is only supplying half of the installed capacity, of the power station. Now, the GCE is also briefly referred to the delay in the return to service of Koeberg Unit number 2. However, what I'd like to emphasize is that the outage has progressed safely and the planned work has been completed. With the startup of the new plant that is now currently in progress. Now, this included a massive scope of maintenance work, as well as a number of plant refurbishment modifications that we had to implement for the extension of Koeberg's life, by an additional 20 years. But importantly, you will recall that in March this year, we unfortunately had to postpone the implementation of 3 of the steam generators on the unit number 2. Now, we had to do extensive inspections on the existing 3 units, which took us almost 30 days. However, it was confirmed and the results were positive that we can utilize it for another cycle. Now, also during this period, the reactor pressure vessel cover replacement was successfully executed. During the plant commissioning that is happening now and the startup phase, unfortunately, we have experienced a number of defects that emerged, which we had to attend to. Now, during the commissioning and startup phase, emerging defects impact the outage duration, as each one needs to be resolved before, we can continue with the startup. So unfortunately, the commissioning startup phase is taking longer than anticipated, than the original plan. But what we continue to make sure is that the execution is happening in a safe way. So this unit is now expected to return to the grid on the middle of July. However, it will take approximately another 10 days, to ramp up to full capacity. So unfortunately, this unit is then delayed by at least a month. Now, looking ahead, by the weekend, we expect to return an additional 5 generators to service. Now, this, together with a lower weekend demand for electricity, will provide the relief we believe we need to restock our open cycle gas power stations with diesel and to fill up our dams at the pump storage dams. Now, regrettably, we will need to continue with stage 2 load shedding up until and over the weekend, in order to make sure that we have adequate capacity starting now at the next week. However, before I ask Rulani to deal with some of the detail, it remains important to understand that we need additional capacity in the country. So because we have a system that's unreliable and unpredictable, constrained, we need this capacity enabled to take some of these units that really need a reliable maintenance to take them off for the extended period that they need. But where we find ourselves, we are not in a position to do the maintenance that is really required to make these units sustainable and reliable. So that 46,000 megawatts of capacity, not only energy, capacity, is required as soon as possible. Rulani, I'd like you now to please continue and take us through some of the detail. Thank you.
Jan, thanks, and afternoon, colleagues. I think yourself, Jan, and Andre have shared enough with regard to the state of affairs. And I would like to maybe mention that we are still obviously dealing with a very vulnerable plant, which is unreliable. We lose average four generators every day due to various reasons. And Jan, as you indicated, we do get many of the machines that we lose on daily basis back on load. However, some, depending on the type of defects, we are unable to return it to service. Our planning horizon actually we have planned for below 12,000 megawatts on unavailability, and currently we're sitting close to 15,000, which is what actually depletes our reserves. And it's the work that we continually have to do as generation. Currently, we have got in the generators that we have on load, due to the defects that all those generators have, they have taken away 7,000 megawatts, which is defects that we are known and defects that we need to deal with. However, obviously, given the fact that we need to balance this with meeting demands of the country, we are unable to take off this machine. So that is the state at which we find ourselves. We have got a lot of our generators that requires maintenance for various defects. And we live with these defects on a daily basis, and we do schedule them for opportunity, some during the weekend when the demand is low, so that we can be able to fix the known defects and return the machines. However, the machines still require the normal planned maintenance, long-term philosophy maintenance to be able to sustain the performance. And unfortunately, at this time of the year, it is not the time where we do a lot of maintenance, knowing the demand of the country. So it is that season where we have to make do with what we can and wait for opportunities when the demand start dropping, when the spring and the summer time comes, where we can be able to do the extensive maintenance. So the GX team is preparing well to ensure that when we get that opportunity to do the outages later in the year, we ensure that these machines, when they return to service, they can operate better than what we're seeing now. So we are still running a very tight ship, and it requires that we continually find ourselves in situations like this where we deplete our reserves and end up resorting to load shedding to ensure that we do not subject the country into blackout. We are returning a number of machines, as Jan has indicated. The 4 machines that we expected back on load today, we have already returned 3. We're remaining with the 1 from Matla. And tomorrow we're returning a unit from Tutuka, and on Friday we're returning other 4 units. So we envisage that our situation should continue to improve towards the end of the week, with an intention to ensure that we can lift this load shedding as soon as we possibly can. Thanks, yeah.
Thank you, colleagues, for that update. We already do have questions. The first one comes from Chris Yelland. I'm going to ask all media to please ask their questions, because after the media briefing, they tend to have...
All right, so we come out of that Eskom briefing where they're just expanding on why we're experiencing load shedding.